Hey, welcome back. By the time you're seeing this, Eleanor behind me has already been in the car show, but I'm trying to get the videos caught up. So there's going to be a whole bunch of videos that are going to be released really quickly and all at the same time. So here's the first one. Welcome back to Duckman Cycles VW Garage. I'm your host, the Duckman. We're back today with my 1956 Volkswagen Beetle, also known as Eleanor. And Eleanor is a chop top, and I really shouldn't say chop top, she's more of a chop up. I cut the car to pieces because it had been rotten in a hurricane, and when I got it, it had holes in every panel, and the thing was just completely destroyed, broke in the middle, and yada yada yada. You guys already know the story. If you're brand new to the channel and you don't, you want to check out the playlist that's down below in the video description or in the first pinned comment. That's right, that's where I'm going to put it. So if you have any questions to what it looked like, please check out the old videos first, and then, of course, post your questions. So anyways, Eleanor, as you know, caved in, so I built this beautiful, and I think it's beautiful anyway, and some people agree, this beautiful chop top that you see right here. And she's not made from all of the original parts. You know, I did the best I could to put together whatever I had or whatever I could fabricate to make it look like an oval, or whatever else I could use off of another car to, you know, kind of fudge it and bring the car back to life. And that's what I did, and I knew it wasn't going to be perfect, so, you know, I did the best I could to make it crooked on purpose, and that's exactly the way it turned out. And I don't know, I have a love affair with this car. This car is just, it means a lot to me. It really means a lot to me. This is something I've always wanted since I was a kid. But today, we're going to be doing something a little different. It's a subject that people always ask about, always asking about. And in fact, I posted a video about it, and it's my most disliked video of the year. But what engine am I going to put in this car? Now, I mentioned before that I had a 1600 dual-port engine ready to go, and that is true. You can actually see it right there underneath my workbench. There's, I think, 2 or 3 engines underneath there. I have to dig in there and find out. Now, both of those engines that are in there are at least 1600s. One of them I actually had the head off of. It was a 1641, or at least that was the piston diameter anyway. I didn't think to check the stroke at the time. I probably should have, but I didn't. They are, as far as I know, both running engines, but they have been underneath this countertop for a long time. Port holes, you know, intake, exhaust ports have all been plugged with paper towels to stop the bugs and the wood chips and shavings and drillings and whatever else from getting in there from the doodle bastard, among other things, which currently is a towel rack. This needs to get to the show too, so I need to get a little more work done on this too this week. But today we're focusing on the engine on the 1956 Oval. So I've got to get underneath this counter here and pull a bunch of this stuff out. Good news is, most of this stuff is on wheels, so I can actually pull this stuff out of there and have that engine out in just a couple minutes. Shouldn't be too big of a deal at all. Once I got the engine out, I'm going to assess it, get it installed on the bell housing here after changing out the throwout bearing. I almost forgot about that. I have a brand new throwout bearing. Let's put that in first. I got to clean up the splines on the input shaft there because they're a bit rusty. Want to make sure that the clutch will slide right over that without having any problems. So I've got a dummy clutch somewhere that I'll test it to make sure that it fits properly before I put this thing together. And then once I've got that far, of course, we're going to dump the oil out of it, put fresh oil in it, and I'm going to crank it over just to see if I get oil pressure on it. If the oil pressure light goes out like it's supposed to, then I guess we'll throw some gas in it and see if we can get it to fire. And if that works, then there's no reason I shouldn't put the rest of the accessories on, like the exhaust and getting the carburetor put on there and the cooling tins and all the other stuff. And I also have a set of cooling tins for this car. They're custom aluminum ones. I don't know where they came from. I don't know who made them. They are definitely aftermarket for sure, but it's all aluminum and they look kind of cool. And while they're not stock and they probably won't cool as efficiently, I think it's going to look good for the car show, and they actually install real easily. That's what I'm going to be putting on this engine temporarily for the car show. I'll probably change that all out in the future, but that's what we've got. Like, comment, and subscribe. Pluck that little dingle belly down there next to the subscribe button. That way you get updates every time I upload a new video. And don't forget to join Duckman Cycles VW Garage group page over on Facebook. There'll be discussion on what we're working on here, perhaps the body, maybe the doodle bastard, you know, doodle bastard towel rack, custom towel rack over here, or anything else that you can think of that you might want to share. That's the place to do it. So thanks for watching, you guys. I really appreciate it, and we'll be back in a minute. Ayo! Alright, and we are back, and it is humid AF outside. I mean, I am just sweating through. It is absolutely disgusting, and I thought that we were done with this nasty weather crap, but it turns out, nope, got us another heat wave. And I think it's Probably close to about 90 out there, maybe a little higher than that with a 200% humidity. It's disgusting. I'm already soaked through. I've only been out here for a few minutes. But I pulled out the engines, plural. Both of them were underneath the counter there, and everything was on wheels, as I said, so it was real easy to just pull them out. I swept around the area and cleaned up a little bit in that garage because I haven't been under that counter in a couple years. So there was a lot of shavings, dirt, and wood chips, and whatever I was working on wound up underneath there. But here is one of the engines that I pulled out. This is, I believe, a stock 1600 dual port. This was completely rebuilt before I bought it. It came with another car. I sold the car without it and ended up keeping the engine. And I didn't plan to keep the engine, but I had it put away. I just couldn't get to it easily, and I ended up giving a different engine with the car anyway. So I'm really glad to have this one, and I got pretty good reason to believe that this is going to run. It doesn't have the vacuum advanced distributor on it, which I would really like to see, but that's fine. It can be easily changed out, but it has a nice rebuildable old classic mechanical fuel pump. And generally, it looks like it's in pretty good shape. Just dirty. Then, next to it over here, this is the engine tins that I was telling you about. Everything's made from aluminum. Looking at this stuff, I never really got that. Of course, my phone's going to go off. I'm actually on the clock today, so I'm going to do as much as I can here. The tins on this engine here are all aluminum. And they're custom stamped. I thought they were handmade, but it looks like no. The ones that go over the cylinders are actually custom stamped by machine. And the shroud itself looks like it was put together by hand, but very, very elegantly put together with rivets. And it looks really nice. It just looks really, really nice, even in its natural finish. That grayish white aluminum look. I would probably rub it down with a Scotch-Brite just a little bit and try to put a grain into it and see what it looks like from there. But it is there is an alternator on there. These do have alternator stands, as you can see. That alternator, I believe, is good. We will find that out, of course, once we put it on the car and get the engine running on it. I have to find the pulley to it. I don't know where the hell the pulleys are. Both the engine pulley and the generator or alternator pulley. I have no idea where those are at. I'm going to have to dig them out. I do have some extra belts, so that shouldn't be a problem. I gotta do some digging. I don't know that I want to run this engine. This engine I got as part of a deal. I bought a car. It came with two engines. The engine that was in the car I was told was never going to run. Well, guess what? I got it running. I got it running, and then I ended up selling that engine off. And then this engine was put aside, and I was told it was a 2-liter, but I popped the head off of it, and I looked inside, and it's a 1641. So, yeah, 2-liter nothing. It's a 1641 as far as the pistons are concerned. It might be a stroker. I mean, there's a possibility it's a stroker to bring it up to 2 liters, but I'm kind of doubting that. The guy I got it from, he was a little foggy about the whole Volkswagen world. I mean, he wasn't trying to mislead me. I don't think that he understood what he had, which is why he gave me a whole garage full of parts in a car for as cheap as he did. He was kind of desperate for money at the time, and I didn't want everything. I only wanted to buy a few pieces, and he ended up giving me a package deal for everything, and out the door I went. It was a pretty good day for me because I sold off a ton of it and made a lot of money in the process for other projects. In the end, I still had a motor, so that worked out quite well. I did notice on this cooling shroud that there is no accommodations for a doghouse oil cooler. I'd have to run an external. I'd much rather have a doghouse cooler like this one has on it. So maybe I won't be using the shroud for the show, or if I do, then that means the engine may not be running. Or, and I really don't want to do this, I could probably just loop the oil back into itself, because this is just going to be a show motor. It's only going to run like for minutes, and not long enough to get the oil hot. I could probably fudge that, and I really don't feel comfortable doing that, but I don't think it's going to kill anybody if I don't run an oil cooler on an engine that runs, only a minute or two. What the hell is that? Somebody looked like they were dragging a bed frame down the street in their car trunk. Nice. That's how we move furniture here in the hood. We just drag it behind our cars. Wish I had a close-up of that one. I mean, that was just too ridiculous not to get a video of. I think it's a bed frame or something. But he's just dragging it down the street. Just dragged a piece of furniture. I've never seen anything like that in my life. Well, okay. If he's happy with it, I'm happy with it. Let's get back to work on my car. I'm kind of on the fence here as to which engine I want to use. With all this cooling shroud and being not stock, and I know you stock Nazis really do like to have things stock, and John over at Volkswagen Planet probably looks at this and I don't know, it probably makes him run to the bathroom and poo. I love you, John, but I know that you're not into anything that's not stock, and that's not stock. I don't know, I'm really on the fence here of which engine I want to put in and try to run. This one I know will run. This one is really a lot of uncertainty, but it sure looks cool. All those tins around the front all need to be figured out too. That stuff is all wrong. I probably won't be running these aluminum tins on the long run either. Oh, Jesus, this is a really hard decision. Really hard decision. All right, I'm going to kick it around a little bit off camera and see what I come up with, and as soon as I start back up, you'll see. When you just can't budge and you don't know how to make a decision, and you just can't get your mind to move, put a little lubricant on it. Lube goes a long way. I think we're going to go with this one. And with this one, only for one reason. Because the level of completeness on it, for the image that I want to portray it as, I mean, look at all that aluminum stuff. It's different than stock. And this car is so different from stock. If I were going to put this engine in place, it would just, well, it would be like stock. And I'm trying to stay away from that, just for the show anyway. So I think we'll put this engine in there, and hopefully it'll run. I don't know what to expect out of it, I really don't. So let's go ahead and start plugging some stuff together here, and let's see what happens. All right, let's get back to this project after another word from our sponsors. Now, believe it or not, the Duckman has never, ever replaced a throwout bearing on a late model throwout shaft before. This is actually new to me. I'm looking at this thing, and it looks like there's little clips on here that need to be pried out. And it's very, very different from an earlier model. I don't see any safety wire in here. In the earlier models, these little clips are known for popping out, but it looks like they're captive in here, so these don't come apart. It's probably one of the reasons why they redesigned it. I kind of like the earlier design, but after reviewing this one here, I can see why this is just better. But anyway, it's without checking the instruction manuals, I'm going to see if I can get this thing apart myself. And it looks like I'm probably going to be prying these little springs out, like I said, here with just a screwdriver. Let's see if that does it. Got one. Looks like I got it. Now, I have never had one of those out before. Ugh. Dirt and shit behind it. Yeah, that's the first time I ever had one of those apart. These springs are actually kind of thin. The earlier model springs, the little clips that always do fall out, are actually heavier than that. But I guess they don't have to be too heavy. Now, I see they also have this this little tube in here with 3 bolts that holds it to the transmission bell housing, and that this bearing is supposed to slide over it and keeps it centered. It's a little bit rusty, so I'm going to clean that up with a little bit of sandpaper, and I'm going to grease it. And I don't want to grease it a whole lot, because of course any grease that's in here, if it's excessive, is going to sling out, and it might get in your clutch. And being on this side of the pressure plate, it probably won't, but let's not tempt fate, and we're just going to get a little smearing on there after we clean that up a little bit. Pushing on the throwout shaft, this is how it operates. Pushes just like that. Bushing feels nice and solid in there. In fact, looking at the color of it, it looks like it was probably recently replaced even. It's still got the zinc coating on it. These typically are either brass or aluminum. I don't think I've ever seen a steel one, but being that it looks like it has a zinc coating on it, it's probably a steel one. But yeah, it feels good and tight when I push on it. I don't feel any lateral movement in it. It's not going side to side. So I think that ought to work just fine. So we'll put this in here after we clean this up. I also want to wire wheel off the splines on the shaft because they're kind of rusty. This is just a clutch that I have just to see if it's going to slide. Oh, actually, it slid on those splines with no problem at all. I expected there'd be a little resistance because of the rust, but I'm going to wire wheel that, and then of course once it's wire wheeled, well, I'm just going to wire brush it. I'm not going to get quite into the wire wheel. But once that's done, then I'll smear a little grease on it. Again, not too much, just a very, very light coating, because if it's too much, it'll get in your clutch. And this is more likely to get in your clutch because it'll come up this way. Of course, you want to lube the end for the bearings inside of the gland nut. This little tip here actually goes into the nut that's on the flywheel. And there's roller bearings in there, so that way when this clutch disengages, this shaft is allowed to spin freely inside the crankshaft. And that's how that operates. But yep, we'll clean this up, and we'll put this sucker on here, and yeah, it looks pretty good to me. This is a nice brand-named stock, yes, Volkswagen Planet, stock throwout bearing. This is a proper, made in Germany, branded throwout bearing. You pay a little extra for these. I mean, you can get the generic ones for like 15 bucks, but this one was almost 40, and I might have overpaid for it, but again, you're paying for that brand name, and this is, you know, it's gonna work right, so that's what we're gonna be using inside of there. Let me grab some sandpaper and we'll start cleaning this thing up. A piece of emery would probably be the proper way to do this, but I don't have any readily available. I'll have to go to the store. Go in the store. Actually, there's not that much rust on it. It's almost all off already. It was only surface rusted. Yeah, that cleaned up real well, real easily. Okay, I'm happy with that. We'll go ahead and we'll get that greased up. Clean the debris out of the bottom of the bell housing here. Try to clean any of the rust that we can out of the input shaft splines. This doesn't need to be perfect, as we demonstrated that clutch actually did slide onto this without any real problems, so it doesn't need to be cleaned too much. Actually, it looks like it wasn't all that rusty. It's just surface rust, it's just some dust that was on it. But that clutch goes in there nice and easy. And that's important, because if that doesn't happen, then the engine will be impossible to mount. Okay, I'll get a little grease on that shaft in here. Put a little bit of grease on the tube. Very, very light coating. Just enough to make it slick. Again, it might sling off, and if it slings off, it'll get in your clutch. You don't want your clutch to slip. Now, I don't think there's an up on this, but going by most things, typically the text faces upwards, and this is actually the way the other one came off. It was just like this with the spring hooks facing up. So I'll put it on just like that. And let's see if I can get this thing clipped in there. And I'm sure there's an easier way to do this. I never checked the service manual on it, I probably should have. Now that was easy, that was one. There it is. I had to actually push on the shaft a little bit. Oh no, my business phone is ringing once again. That stupid iPhone. Okay, let's go find out what's going on. Not excited about it, but guess what? That's right, I'm being shipped to Tallahassee, and this time without an option. They're forcing me to go out there. There's a computer terminal in one of the restaurants that is down, it's dead, and it seems to be kind of a big deal. I don't think it should be a big deal. I think they can wait. This is particularly not high priority. It's not one of the servers, it's not one of the important running machines, it's just in the drive-thru, you know? So what? You got two drive-thru windows with two sets of terminals, and the reason why they do that is so they have a backup. And one of them's down. It could wait a couple of days, but no, they don't want to wait a couple of days. They want it done now. So anyways, I'm headed out to Tallahassee in a little bit, but we're going to record more of this video first because I feel that this is important. It needs to be done. My time is limited. And, well, I got to set my priorities. You know, I mean, that's just the way it works. So, we're going to grease up this shaft a little bit here. Again, not a whole lot of grease. Just put some on it. Make sure you get the tip. Just a tip, baby, just a tip. Alright, smear off any excess, anything that's loose. You just want a layer on it. Okay, I think we're in pretty good shape here. And then while I'm at it also, and I'm inside of here, I'm going to go ahead and hit the starter gear on the starter motor also. This is a starter from an automatic transmission. It's also a starter from a semi-automatic transmission. It's self-supported. There's usually a shaft that comes through here, and there's a little bushing inside here. But this starter that I'm using, you see a look at it here, it's actually a much bigger, longer starter. It doesn't require that extra bushing here in the transmission, so it's free sitting. Now, I don't think that's going to matter in this situation. They do work on a manual transmission just the same. The only reason why I picked it is because it looks like it's nearly brand new, so it's nice and clean. So it should demonstrate itself pretty well at the car show for anybody that actually does look up underneath my chassis, and they might, because I'm going to try to pull some of these wheels off and show the car properly. I guess it's about time to start hanging an engine. Okay, I've never mounted an engine by hand before. Usually I run a jack or something up underneath it. But in this case, I think I'm just going to lift it, slip it right in there, and slap a bolt into it. I think it's going to be a whole lot easier than trying to set up a jack. So, here's hoping that everything lines up the first time. It does have the correct pressure plate on here with the appropriate stuff that meshes with the throwout bearing from the later model. The earlier models actually have a ring that's in the middle here. And you can remove the ring and turn it into a pressure plate for a later model, but in this case it's not necessary. This thing should work just fine as long as there's no nastiness inside the splines inside the clutch, which it looks like it's not. In fact, it's even a little greasy. So being a little greasy is a good thing. That stopped the rust from forming. Okay, let's go ahead and lift this engine and slap it in there. I've got my nut and bolt for this starter bolt, and the starter bolt is already in place right up here. So we're going to see if we can push it right into that and get this engine mounted the easy way. Got it. Well, that sure beats putting a jack underneath it, jacking it a little bit, playing with it, jacking and playing, jack it, playing. What's the matter with my nut? Threads are muff. The engine is now in the car. This is the first time I've had an engine mounted on this chassis since I've got this thing all rebuilt, and I'm rather pleased to see progress such as this. And I see the rear end has dropped down a little bit as a result. Those axles are much more straight, maybe even angled upwards a little bit, showing that it has moved. See if it settles a little more if I push on it. Yeah, it did. It actually settled and went down a little more. We have an engine in the car. Now, of course, I'm going to run the two nuts on the bottom of the bell housing. I'm going to tighten up this one on the top here, and I've got to run a bolt in there up here on the clutch shaft side. And I hate this bolt. This bolt, I am not a fan of this design. This is always really, really hard to get into because the clutch cable and all that stuff is always in the way. And with the body on the car, the body's right about here, so it's really impossible to get to. So I'm just not a fan of that design at all. And in fact, in Eleanor's body, in the rear package area, in there just below the back window, I'll probably cut a hatch and make a removable panel, so that way it's real easy to change out clutch cables. And if I pull a motor, it's real easy to pull that bolt out from the top side. As you see, it's real easy to get to from where I'm standing right now. And we're going to see how much more progress I can get on this thing before I have to leave. I have another customer contacting me also about his website that apparently is missing some features or not working consistently across all browsers. And that's always been an issue with things like Internet Explorer. And for those of you out there that are web programmers, you know that Internet Explorer is the bane of our existence, and it may work fine in every other browser, but Internet Explorer, it doesn't work right in. And if you make adjustments to make it work in Internet Explorer, all of a sudden the rest of the browser is screwed up too. So you got to find the best balance. And it sounds like the complaint is about the administrative control panel that I built for him. So if it's the administrative control panel, you can dictate what browser they are supposed to use. If it's, of course, customer side, you don't ever know what browser the customer is using, so you cannot dictate to the customer what browser to use. But if it's the administrative side and the IE isn't working right, I'm sorry, I just don't use Internet Explorer with it. So I'm going to look into that a little more closely, and I'll find out what's going on for him and get that straightened out too. But not without getting a little more work done on this car first. The most wonderful thing about putting a Volkswagen engine into the car without the body on it is you can reach the bolts all the way around the car real easily with both your hands and a tool from the top side without having to crawl around underneath or dealing with all the nonsense associated with that. So I got that nut on there, I've got the bolt on the top, and I'm going to run around the other side and put the other nut on the bottom. We'll get this sucker snugged up, and then we're ready to start cranking this thing over once we dump the oil out of this. Okay, I just happen to have a lightly used 009 distributor, and I hate using these because the vacuum advanced ones are much better. But in order to get an engine running, just for a car show, I think this ought to be fine. I'm not driving it on the street. Just make it run, and that's kind of the goal of what I'm doing here. I will change this out. I have other ones, but this one is in much better shape than the other ones that I've got to rebuild. So in order to get the car running as quickly as possible, a 009 is what I'm going to use. And as I said, and you guys are going to criticize the crap out of me, yes, I know that these don't run the best in a Volkswagen engine for the street. These are better designed for industrial purposes. In fact, that's probably what they're for, because I don't think Volkswagen... in fact, I know that Volkswagen never put a 009 distributor on one of their engines stock. But for industrial purposes, when the engine runs at the same RPM all the time, this is actually just fine. But in this case, we're going to be putting this one on here, and I have, coincidentally, a brand new aluminum clamp, which kind of blends with the rest of the engine case that we've got here. Everything has this kind of silver gray color, and this is actually what I'm going to install on here. So this ought to get the job done. Kind of expensive. I wonder if that's even the right price. Jeez. Looks nice though. Alright, let's put this guy on. Looks like we got some paper in here. Ooh, this is much shinier than I expected it to be. Much shinier. I might have to actually Scotch Brite it just to dull down the shininess, because it's the only thing that's going to stand out as being quite so shiny. This paper out. Okay. I pack all the holes in the engine cases whenever I let these engines sit. This little guy threads onto the stud sticking out of the case first, and then this goes over the whole shebang, just like that. And then, of course, we've got our nut and washer to hold this together, and then the pinch nut, or pinch bolt I should say, goes in through here. Okay, the distributor goes in through the top, just like that. Make sure it goes in all the way. That can be a little tricky sometimes. You gotta make sure that it meshes with the distributor drive also. There it is. There it is. Now we've got a distributor. Now, of course, that was necessary before I ever turned the engine over, because if I did not put that in and I turned the engine over, the engine actually would have swallowed up the distributor drive gears, and they actually chew themselves to pieces. The distributor actually holds that all together. Simple design, not a bad design, just an extremely simple design, and that's just the way they have it work. Okay, that looks good actually. And that might seem kind of boring to you, but just gray is like universal. It's simple. It's even. All right, continue building away here. See what else we can do. I went ahead and pulled out the oil screen to see just what we had inside that engine, and actually it looks clean. There doesn't appear to be anything in there at all. The oil that came out was a golden brown, so apparently it was a semi-clean oil before they dumped it, whoever the previous owner of this engine was. I don't see any reason I couldn't reuse the screen. I'm going to clean it off real well and bolt it back in. The good thing is I did check it, because those nuts that hold it in were actually quite loose. And that's a no-no. And of course, what does that mean? That means you dump your oil out all over the street. A big old black streak, kind of like Spy Hunter. Alright, we're going to clean it up and put it back in. Okay, some people say you should just replace these every time you take the engine apart. They're not expensive, but they're a little hard to come by, so you have to special order them because most auto parts places don't carry them. But this one had no piston bits inside of it, and this is the only filter that a Volkswagen engine actually does have. It's just a screen mesh. So it catches the really big piston bits that blow off, you know, rod bearings that explode. Whenever large chunks that don't make it through the mesh get trapped down inside of this, and as you can see inside of there, it's spotless, it's clean. Other than having a little bit of black schmutz that settled there in the bottom, which most of it actually just cleaned out by just spraying it down with a little bit of degreaser and then hit it with water real quick and it came through the screen. So the little dots are actually smaller than the screen, so it's not actually anything that needs to be filtered out of the engine. This, as long as the flange is not all mangled, and this one it's a little jaggy, but I can straighten that out. It should seal just fine once you get it bolted back in. So we're going to reuse this one. I'm going to clean off a little bit of the gasket paper that used to be on here, put in a fresh set of gaskets. I do have some gaskets in my gasket bin, and we'll put the sucker back together, and then we'll put some oil in it. Okay, this engine was set up for a remote oil cooler, so I'm going to hook up this one that you see right here. It looks like, I don't know, is there an in and out on these things, or are they the same on both sides? I think they're the same. This is only a temporary hookup. Oh, crap, just dumped oil out of it. Yeah. Like there was a little residual still left inside of it. But in order for me to build up oil pressure, I'm going to need to seal the system, and this is where the system is open. So we'll close up the open end right here. Okay, that gives us a sealed system. Normally I would want a stock oil cooler, but in this case, because this is the way the engine is going to set up, and I'm doing this just for aesthetics, just for looks, because I like this silver gray engine of all the aluminum on it for the car show, and there's no other reason. This engine's going to be only temporary anyway, because after the car show I'm pulling it all back apart. Let's hook up some wiring, put some oil inside of here, and replace the oil fill also on it. Good news, just happen to have one. You notice I meticulously plug off all the holes on these engines when they're open. I don't like to leave anything sitting wide open for too long, because all the dirt and stuff finds its way in there. Okay. Are my threads a little dickered? Yeah. Not only are the threads dickered, but the entire the entire pedestal right here is dented. This is not round anymore. It's now D-shaped. I'm gonna have to remove and replace the pedestal on here because it's wrong. It's yeah, that's a little fucked up. Okay. I'm glad I lifted off that pedestal because when I did, normally there's a plate underneath there with 3 louvers in it, and that protects the foam from the oil from coming back up through the filler tube and then spraying out all over the place. And when I lifted that up, I saw something inside of there, and it looked like it was a washer about that big. And I could see it sitting in there, right on top of everything down inside the engine. So I went down in there with a screwdriver and a magnet, and I tried to get it, and then it fell down further in the engine. So I don't know where it went. So unfortunately, this engine is at a stopping point. I cannot work on this engine any further without probably splitting the cases. I don't know what other nuts and bolts are inside of it. This is not an engine that I built. As I said, it came from somebody else. So yeah, I'm at a complete stopping point on this engine. I'm afraid we're going to have to nix this one and go back to the other engine plan. And yeah, unfortunately, we're shit out of luck here. Can't do anything else with what we got. Got to pull it back out, but I'm out of time anyway. It's time for me to take that trip to Tallahassee. Now what I do when I get to Tallahassee, or even on the way there, is I'm going to be recording a video. So you make sure that you watch my YouTube channel over on VW because I'm going to update with Hurricane Michael updates, and this is going to be my last one, making this trip out to Tallahassee, so I get a little video of some of the destruction that you see, because I have to cross through the Panama City metro area to get to Tallahassee. So things are going to be a mess. There's no doubt about that. The interstate was actually closed for something like 2 or 3 days because there was trees and debris all over the road. So it's going to be an adventure. It's definitely going to be an adventure. So you're going to want to watch that. Subscribe to VV and make sure you're watching over there. But for now, we're stopping here. We'll work on this again tomorrow or maybe tonight if I don't get home too late. But seeing as how it's a minimum of a 6-hour drive back and forth plus work time, and I think it's going to be about 4 hours of work time on top of it. I got a 10-hour trip ahead of me, and it's already about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so that makes it midnight before I get home. So I'm not working on this tonight. I may not even get a video up tonight because of how stupid this whole project is. But anyway, that's just the way it goes. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Like, comment, subscribe. And as always, glad to see you, glad to have you. Till next time, keep your ducks if they're nice.